You are listening to Endgame Exotica, a members-only podcast exclusive to WhiteRabbitRadio.net.
This is H. Avenger. You're listening to Endgame Exotica. This is Geopolitics Part B for Monday, May 12, 2013. And yes, you were in the endgame. A gentleman in Switzerland has been jailed for 6 months. 6 months in prison for complaining about Jews on the internet. Interesting. Coming from CFCA, antisemitism.org. 55-year-old man has been found guilty of racial discrimination by a Geneva court for posting anti-Semitic articles on the internet. And this is coming, you better look out. The court heard the man had directed his comments against all Jews and had denied the Holocaust existed in 50 articles published between January 2010 and May this year. Although he repeatedly been asked by authorities to remove text, he refused to do so. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail. Well, at least he could have removed at least they asked him to remove this stuff. He probably wouldn't have got jail if he had removed the stuff, but at least he's a rabbit of principle. Yes, in this particular in-game Exotica, I'm going to answer your questions because I've got new listeners here. New listeners that heard yours truly on Red Ice Creations Radio 314 with Lana, and they liked what they heard, so they've subscribed. I always tell them, Horace, or some are calling me Tim, whatever. If you're subscribing to me, you can call me whatever you want. I've been called a lot worse things than my real name, or a white rabbit. Now the question is, why do you tell us not to subscribe? I didn't say not to subscribe. I said the podcast is free. If you listen to the podcast and how I do the news and views on Horse Avengers Follow the White Rabbit on the podcast page, by all means subscribe. But not everyone likes how I do the news and views. It just depends. We cover all kinds of topics and I try to answer all questions, but my particular method to the madness is pretty wild. And the podcast, Horse Avengers Follow the White Rabbit, has to be listened to in order. Meaning that there's some stuff in there that you might miss or you might like. It's definitely catered for your type of audience, male and female alike. It's got all kinds of wild goodies in there. But it is a free podcast. So I always encourage people to listen to that first and then subscribe if they like how I do news and views. I'm not telling you not to subscribe. I'm just saying that's simply the process. And that way, of course, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. But it's free. It's there. You don't have to actually buy a subscription right off. You can listen to that, and then if you like how I'm doing news and views halfway through, subscribe or wait till you're done. It just depends. And you can go back to In-Game Exotica to listen to the beginning, the final visit to Nazi Never Never Land Ranch. There's all kinds of alt news pieces in Game Exotica. These days I do a lot of geopolitics, and today I'm going to answer questions about the basics. Because I got new listeners asking questions. If you got new listeners, paid listeners asking questions, I answer questions. It's pretty interesting. Now, the first question, and this goes toward the basic. I thought it was excellent work, great work, really nails what we were doing to a T. And they're talking about, this is from an old listener. I think the problem with something like Red Ice is non-white and liberal conspiracy types. Well, there's not a lot of them. Not a lot of non-whites statistically. Liberal conspiracy types aren't going to like the white genocide message. Well, no one does at first. No one does at first. It's too radical. It's too out there. It's too crazy. So they don't do that. They don't like it at first. It's a little bit too much for them, and so they go a little off the wall. But this goes back to the basics. And then I've got another question regarding the same topic, and it all goes down the same corner on why these people continuously yell, because someone on the Facebook link actually said we were promoting ethnic conflict or something that conversation. Obviously, that doesn't make any sense. We're not promoting ethnic conflict, just the opposite. But there's a knee-jerk reaction, and that knee-jerk reaction can be explained by psychological warfare. I've been asked to go into this a little more detail in the actual process or what America's underwent. It's very easy. I know all about it. Ideological subversion is the old Soviet topic. The communists were the first to make it into an institutional endeavor. Doesn't matter whether it's Novosti, Pravda, all these different news magazines at one time were all active under the KGB arms. And it's called several different names. Psychological warfare is what it's known for in the West, but there's a patent process. And I'll go over that, and then I'm going to answer the question some very intelligent listeners have already asked. Now, Now, within regards to that particular conversation, in regards to active measures, and in the Soviet terms it's called ideological subversion or active measures, Activnia Meropanacha. Since Lana, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Lana is from Russia. Originally she has Russian roots. That's what it's called, Activnia Meropanacha. And I'm probably butchering it a little bit, but it's been a long time since I pronounced it. Ideological subversion, active measures, is a four-step process. Psychological warfare is a four-step process. And the ideal in the first step is very slow. It takes 15 to 20 years to demoralize. The first step is demoralization. It takes 15 to 20 years to demoralize a society. Why that long? Because it takes that long to put one group of rabbits underneath the new educational system, underneath the new media, to immerse them. And ideological subversion is the correct name. That is my favorite name for it, actually. And that is the objective of all psychological warfare. And that's to basically change the perception of reality to such an extent that despite an abundance of true information, no one can come to a sensible conclusion to defend themselves, their family, their race, their culture. I'm going to repeat that again. That's pretty big. Ideological subversion is basically an immersion of a group of people, a nation, a group. By the way, when America took over Iraq, it's the same thing. It's ideological subversion. They want to put one generation under the ideology of the enemy, whatever that ideology is. Americanism, Americans consumerism. You could go into eating at Burger King, all the stuff they did when they took over Iraq not too long ago. 10 years or so, whatever it's been, 12 years, I can't remember. When the George Bush, the shrub, the second one, went in there. But to change the perception of reality to such an extent, despite an abundance of true information, no one can come to sensible conclusion to defend themselves, their family, their loved ones, their race, their culture, their country. It is a massive brainwashing technique. And of course, the ideal is to expose one generation, thoroughly expose them, totally indoctrinate them into the ideology of the enemy, whatever that ideology happens to be. White genocide was probably the most massive thing to ever hit Western civilization. By that I mean the whole entire apparatus. Everything's anti-white. Now, once that process is complete, it's been complete in America, depending on who you talk to, from the late 70s to, at worst, the late 80s. It's been totally complete. The next step in subversion is destabilization. It takes 2 to 5 years to destabilize a country or an organization. An organization can come much quicker. There are 3 fundamental factors to destabilize a country. Economy, which is kind of common sense, foreign relations, and defense systems. Right now, if you look at what Obama's doing, Vladimir Putin has said Obama's either crazy or is trying to destroy America. Well, no, they're in a rapid destabilization. They're rapidly destabilizing the military. They're rapidly destabilizing certain elements of the economy, or getting things ready to potentially hit a trip hammer. And they're also messing around with foreign relations. At any given time, there's a war going on at where we're at in America in regard to this templates. But you've got demoralization. And remember that true information means nothing to a brainwashed person, even if it's true. In Western civilization, there's only stimuli and input, meaning that when they ring the bell, Pavlov's dog barks. When you start talking about white issues, when you talk beyond the anti-white schema, when you go outside that discussion parameters on the university or on Red Ice Creations, they are trained to yell racist, anti-Semite, racist, anti-Semite, Nazi, white supremacist. It's all the same bullshit. They are done with mentally. They are done with. There's a certain percentage we're stuck with indefinitely. But then you have destabilization. Again, destabilization can happen very quickly. 2 to 5 years. Economy, foreign relations, defense systems. 3 would be crisis. And you can bring a country into crisis within 6 months. The final step, of course, is a normalization and a violent change of power, or a violent shakedown of that society. And normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Brezhnev when they took over Czechoslovakia. Brotherly Czechoslovakia is now undergoing normalization. And obviously it wasn't normalization, it was a violent shakedown. It's when the big boot hits their tails. It's when everyone realizes something's going on. And of course, most of the active elements, the academic elements, this is always the big scandal in communism. Communists generally would line up all their active commie friends, whether it be an academic, if you look at Mujibur Rahman and everything that happened around some of these different famous communist characters that came to power. Okay, what would happen is the whole entire apparatus that brought them to power, that brought about demoralization and destabilization, whole certain elements, had to be shot, because the academics, the wonks, think they're coming to power. They're not. They're not coming to power. They just think they are. They're useful idiots, is what the term is. Okay, so now let's walk back into this particular factor, and we're going to talk about what's going on in alternative news and research, what's going on in greater society. After 15 to 20 years of demoralization, what does it take to reverse that? Well, it takes 15 to 20 years under healthy patriotism, under healthy media. Russia underwent this, post-Putin. Okay, America has never underwent a healthy patriotism or a healthy media, none of Western civilization. Everything's anti-white, everything's pro-white genocide. Okay, what else can happen? Well, you can have a new form of media. Actually, a new form of media is far more revolutionary. It doesn't happen on the scene as much as changes of power, changes of who's running the media or this or that, who's running this newspaper, blah, 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 blah. New form of media is extremely radical, but it still takes 15 to 20 years. The funny thing about a new form of media, whenever a new form of media comes out, and the internet is the most radical we've ever seen, probably as radical or more so than the printing press, maybe even more so, because everyone couldn't have a printing press, but everyone can have an internet website. Generally speaking, the process of active measures, ideological subversion, comes to a complete halt. It's over with. True information starts seeping in. The process now reverses to a core percentage. Not the whole particular kebab. A certain percentage you're stuck with. Pavlov's dog is going to bark when they ring that bell. No matter what. They're over with. Done. Done, done, done. They won't realize anything's wrong until it all comes down around them. They are gone mentally. Just because they listen to alternative news and research doesn't mean they're not brainwashed. Bill O'Reilly is a very smart individual. No one could say he's dumb, but he is absolutely, he's been drinking the anti-white Kool-Aid for so long, either he's a great actor or he's gone mentally. He's gone. He still tries to universalize things like hate. Well, everyone's capable of hate, and so, Eric Holder's not applying hate crime laws to anyone. Oh. In Canada, they're not applying hate speech laws to just anyone. In France, by the way, there's all kinds of Muslim hate speech. They don't get arrested for hate speech. Who does? Brigitte Bardot. Why? Hate only applies to us. Only white people are going to be having a conversation about who hate applies to on something like the O'Reilly factor in front of 40 million white people in an otherwise Western civilization. It only applies to us. It's not a universal. But he drinks so anti-white Kool-Aid and he can't understand this. And you can bounce stuff off this type of individual over and over again, but he's done for mentally. True information means nothing to them, even if it's true. Facts, you can inundate them with facts. The communists used to do this. They used to bring over these Hollywood celebrities they had brainwashed. They used to take them on tours of Soviet Union. And they would none of them would realize that they had to cross an actual border with armed guards that shot people for leaving a workers' paradise. And they never thought to question the fact that if you have a workers' paradise, you shouldn't have to shoot people that try to leave. You shouldn't want to leave. Again, but people that are demoralized, people that are brainwashed, it's over with. They're putty. They're silly putty. But here's the funny thing in this system. What happens if this process isn't complete? What happens if you got 15, 20 years demoralization? You're into the late 80s. You have a stock market collapse. You plan on jump-starting your New World Order. And all the Red Ice listeners have heard of the New World Order fantasies. They're going to have a bunch of helter-skelter and maybe even a knockoff alien invasion or some World War III. They're going to bring out a hologram of Jesus, the hidden Mahdi, and everything else, and they're going to impose the New World Order. Well, maybe that's true. But what happens and that could be a crisis. After all, pretty easy to generate a crisis if you want to do a knockoff UFO invasion. Right? Who knows? Who knows what they're capable of? They're capable of some wild statements, so they might be capable of some wild actions. They're completely nuts, in my opinion, so they're capable of anything. With that being said, what happens if you go into this process, demoralization, destabilization? You have several different crises. The crash of 1987 was a big crisis that many thought that they were going to try to use as to set off a bunch of Ocean 11 style. Now I'm talking about the movie Ocean 11 style helter-skelter scams helter-skelter style scams to fool people, economic collapse, World War III, you name it. You name it. Just a period of different con jobs going on at one time to usher in some type of normalization, some type of true crisis that would lead to some permanent violent overthrow at the local level and normalization. Everyone's read the articles about the elites fantasizing about getting rid of most of the planet. 90% of the planet's going to die, blah, 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 blah. You've all read about it. The Malthusian stuff. And so there's many different angles to go down. But what happens when this process starts to reverse itself? Well, you're in trouble because someone else can put you into crisis. Someone else can bring about, you could certainly, with enough agents involved, bring about destabilization in America very easily because of the dominant financial position we're in. You remember one of the elements of destabilization is economics, and America's only a hair away from economic chaos at any given time. The crash of 87, the mini crash in Asia of 1998, all this proves what I'm saying, the NASDAQ crash of 2000. Now, the elites have a reserve status currency, which means they can bail themselves out historically. But what happens if one morning they don't want it? They want to spring another trap. I don't see that happening right this minute, but I could be wrong. Others do. So you got destabilization, foreign relations, and of course, you can see it under Obama. You can see it if you look at Putin's statement. He understands this process. Crisis is very easy to bring about, especially if you have a planet built like we have now, with these crazy private central banks and all these crazy social engineering schemes, everything else. Then normalization, which is the big boot in your face, and everyone realizes it. But that process has been reversed in America. It's been reversed everywhere because the internet. Where's the internet? Well, 1995 it came out, so 2000 you're dealing with 5 years, 2010, 15 years, we're at 19 years. We're right on time. There's a reason this stuff is working like magic. There's a reason why a bunch of white rabbits will go over to the Red Ice Creations interview on Facebook and start putting out the message when the Red Ice Creations interview, the Radio 314 interview by Lana, gets actually put out. They, of course, there's a bunch of anti-whites who are brainwashed, who come up there with the usual nonsense. They're having a reaction, and white genocide is a very aggressive meme to generate such a reaction. They, of course, hit it with a counter-prevailing meme. Anti-racist is just a code word for anti-white. Diversity is just a code word for white genocide over and over again. The problem for the system now is that the system cannot adjust. It can't make even a small adjustment to get out of the way of the useful idiots. The useful idiots are no longer useful. Now they're detrimental to the system. Why? You have the demoralization process reversing for a whole segment of the population. They're starting to ask very healthy questions across the board. And you have a whole segment that can't get out of the way of yelling the old weaponized words that keep the whole entire prison held together. Racist, anti-Semite. They can't get out of the way of it. So we just hit them with the consistent message over and over again. And the system pyramids, system just accelerates into the ground. They can't get out of the way of it. Bill O'Reilly, even on his show, the elites have tried to angle to talk about race issues, to talk about black on white crime, to talk about all kinds of stuff. It doesn't matter. They can't angle to get away from it. It brings the old charges. All it does is these elements that are brainwashed get more and more radicalized in yelling white supremacists. They get more and more radicalized. And the prevailing consistent message, like the mantra, like my particular job to put out, actually becomes more dominant. Because the more they oppose it, the more they get hit with the consistent message in society, the more white rabbits wake up to it, the more of them defend themselves for being white. It starts a virtuous circle. And actually, in this type of system, it brings about the change very aggressively, kind of like it did in the Soviet Union. They actually are detrimental to the system. It's kind of like once you take over a system, they want to line up all the useful idiots and shoot them because they think they're coming to power. They think they know something. They don't. They're just idiots. They're useful idiots. In this type of system, they can't actually shoot them, so they end up actually dragging the whole system down. They don't know how to reverse. They don't know how to turn it off. It's programming. You ring the bell, Pavlov's dog goes, roof, roof. In this case, they go racist, racist. It is the way it works. So it doesn't really matter that's alt news. The problem that you get into is that if you like something and that's controversial and that's making you think, that's making you look at the world a different way, you want to go out of your way and you want to send those people an email and congratulate them or thank them for having someone like me on, or there's plenty of other examples. But you want to do that. The only ones that ever bitch about anything are generally the people unhappy. People that are happy, when rabbits are happy, they don't bitch about anything. They don't yell and scream. They're not unhappy. When rabbits are happy, they don't really complain about anything. They send letters of congratulations or emails to me. emails to me. And, of course, that's the way that works. But don't think, just because you're in alt news, that there are not a bunch of brainwashed people there. There are a huge number of brainwashed people there. Huge number. But there's a growing number of people willing to send me emails, like this one. This is from, we'll call him Zella the White Rabbit. Hey, I just listened to Tim Murdoch's interview on Radio 314. I'm a regular listener to Red Ice as well. I'm very impressed with your interview. It's not often I can listen to something that I can relate to these days. I was unfortunately born white and Polish. If you guys ever need graphic art free of charge, I'm willing to help your cause. I was actually shocked by how well of a graphic artist he is. Zella the White Rabbit is pretty much an amazing artist. Definitely in the top 3, but this is the type of thing, and I'm reading the one that just came in. There's a lot more of these. A lot more of these coming in. Wow, I can't believe what I heard. You put it all together. Yeah, and what I encourage these particular individuals to do is by all means start listening to Follow the White Rabbit, and by all means just learn to defend yourself from being white. If everyone could do that, this is over with very quickly. And yes, we're going to have Lana. We're trying to get Lana. I'm going to get Lana as soon as I got we're in planning season here, meaning I got to plan a bunch of stuff on a farm and everything else. Once we're past planning season and I got everything cleared away with some family challenges, then I'm going to have Lana on Horse Avengers Follow the White Rabbit. Hopefully she'll come on and everything will go well. She said yes, so she seems like a can-do type of white woman. Now, what else do I have to say? Yeah, here's one that come in from Charlie. Just got around to listen to Red Ice interview and shared it. Listener, I've started promoting it. I'll do it some more. Great interview. Keep up the good work. Very impressed. This type of thing is going in, but what I'm encouraging these guys to do is please send a brief email to Red Ice so they know you like it. Now, they might want to have me on, they might not. It may cost them a lot. I don't know. Having someone like me on, white genocide is a very aggressive message. You can't break through psychological warfare with mamby-pamby messages. Well, I know. I've tried. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, new subscriber. Let's see here. One aspect of ethnic cleansing of whites. I don't know if this is one of the new subscribers, but they asked this question, so I'll send them this podcast as complimentary. One aspect of ethnic cleansing of whites from North America is a large-scale kidnapping of white children. Yeah, there's all kinds of missing white children. I agree with that. Very weird stuff. Where I live in West Texas, they are primarily kidnapped by Hispanics, to much lesser extent by blacks. I haven't heard much about this. Hispanics have a kidnap culture, and they kidnap children of every race, and even white adults for both sexes for use as sex slaves. Well, sex slavery and sex trafficking is a big problem. It is a tremendous problem, and I've developed a sensitivity to it. Whenever I see Hispanic adults with a white child or white children, I try to get a license plate number, street address, and inform the local police. They follow up on the information. I've been responsible for the recovery of literally dozens of kidnapped white children. Good for you, White Rabbit. I hope you will inform others of this problem. Well, I know that there was a white kid seen with a Hispanic family, and it made the news everywhere. But I think, obviously, I think that's kind of a common sense thing to do, and I salute you, John the White Rabbit. That's kind of wild stuff. Hopefully, I definitely is something to talk about. I view all this as a consequences of white genocide, as a byproduct of white genocide. And nothing more, nothing less. But I encourage everyone to, if you like what I had to say on Red Ice, you'd probably like Horse Avengers Follow the White Rabbit. It's free to listen to it before you subscribe, or whatever you want to do. Tell people what to do. Now, let's go over some comments. I wanted to get that out of the way. So we have a 4-step process. Demoralization, destabilization, crisis, normalization. What you need to understand, this applies to many organizations. The neoconservatives, the neoconservative Jews, did this exact same template to the Republican Party. Didn't they? Yes, they did. They basically hijacked the whole entire Republican Party. What did they do? They demoralized the place. They did it by taking over the media. Again, how long does this take? About 15 to 20 years, but it can happen pretty quickly. Then, of course, they destabilized certain publications. They just called authors and whatnot anti-Semites, and they got rid of anything healthy, definitely anything remotely pro-white. And then, of course, they brought crisis in places like the National Review. And then, of course, they sat on at normalization. And the Republican Party has been under normalization ever since then. This is typical. This is typical type of stuff that you need to know about. Subversives are subversive. An ideological subversion, the whole entire ideal is to put a generation or a group of people under the ideology of the enemy. Brainwash them. It's a big deal. It's big business. And you need to know about it. Okay, let's see here. I can't go from one of the coolest aliases ever to Tim Murdoch. I think Team Murdoch might work, though. Well, John, The funny thing is, when I first went to the first Stormfront conference, and I showed up there, Don Black refused to use my real name, and he pinned H-Avenger or White Rabbit on me. So people have been calling me that ever since. 80% of the females prefer call me Tim. So I think it's kind of interesting. 20% prefer the rabbit stuff. On the males, usually about 90% prefer to call me Horace or White Rabbit. Now, I'll never be known as anything else. I've already accepted that. It's the welcome to the anonymous model. Let's see what else we got here. And that's the whole gist of this particular podcast. Do I think that the particular model for active measures, this model, this demoralization, this model for subversion, this model for takeover that was institutionalized in the Soviet Union, do I think that is modern or ancient? I think it's ancient. I think you can go back to ancient Egypt, the Hyksos, Manetho on the Hyksos, and look at what they did in Egypt. I think you're going to get a similar template. Subversives always operate under similar templates. They operate under similar templates. That's just the way it goes. That's the way it goes. And again, they don't call it ideological subversion, but once you subvert it, once that individual subvert it, there's only two ways to reverse it: new media or change of media ownership. One didn't happen, the other did. Now we have the reversal. Now, of course, our enemies actually work against the system with a consistent message live. But I appreciate all the new listeners. Those that like the interview, this is mandatory for In-Game Exotica listeners. Take a few minutes, go over to Red Ice Creations, and send them an email expressing that you liked it. Because the only ones that ever bitch about anything are unhappy rabbits. Unhappy rabbits always bitch. Happy rabbits are happy. But it's very important when you have something controversial, and there's probably many instances of like this. You hear a podcast that's controversial, you like it, but you don't send anyone congratulations. Why? You liked it. On the other hand, others that don't like it are the ones that send in protesting, pissed off. So definitely send them an email thanking them. It's very important. Definitely when Lana goes over the line, and even when you read articles over there that are more pro-white oriented, Lana and Henrik are basically responsible for putting that stuff out. My understanding is, but Lana plays a big role. She's went over the line on Radio 314. If you have someone like me on, you're stating you're willing to have a discussion on anything, really, and that's important for any type of open society at all. But anytime someone does something like that, definitely send in an email thanking them, or at least a letter of praise, simply because the only ones that ever talk up are pissed off people, and it's kind of like that with anything. But it's very important to support your own, especially in this business. And I was happy to see the swarm on Facebook. If you go to Red Ice Creations fan book on Facebook, they were going nuts. Anti-whites were going nuts at first. A handful. It's never more than a handful. Heavens knows we got thousands of people coming over to our website from that particular interview. I have no how many. I've been asked how many listened online. I have no idea. How many people download? I have no idea. It's not like it's going anywhere. They're going to keep it up. I know even Dr. Kevin McDonald over at Occidental Quarterly wants the video when they put it up on YouTube. Red Ice has a YouTube channel, and I'm guessing they'll eventually put it up, or maybe not, but he wants to play it on his site, which I thought is kind of interesting because he normally doesn't play my talks. He plays the animations. With that being said, it's very important to understand what role we play. We're at the psychological warfare level. We're at the active measures level. We're at the counter-subversion. And to counter that, you have to go back into the point of programming. You have to reverse the process. And you do it the same way it was done, with simple memes. It's not complicated. It's just a force of nature. And the enemy actually, at that point in time, starts working against themselves. I know it's hard to believe. It's usually not believed by anyone until everything comes down around them. Now, what the powers to be have planned, what they have shaken, well, that's the subject of In-Game Exotica. I entertain all different theories because they got stuff cooking. There's nothing by accident going on. They're leading into something. They've done this several times before and backed down. And they backed down to some of their big scenarios before. I'm thoroughly convinced of that. And who knows? Who knows? But keep listening to In-Game Exotica, and by all means, ask questions. If you're a subscriber, you can comment, or you can send in questions. I answer to HoraceTheWhiteRabbit@gmail, or you can comment directly on the thread, and I try to answer all questions. If I don't answer something, just send an email again or tell me again, and I'll definitely answer it. But this is H-Avenger. Keep listening to In-Game Exotica. Keep the station tuned here at WhiteRabbitRadio.net. I'll be back with you Wednesday. Something new, something interesting. And thank you again, all new subscribers. Thanks for all the words of praise on Red Ice Creations. Send it to them as well. Send them a thank you. Anytime someone has an open mind in this society, they deserve a thanks. And by all means, defend yourself from being white. When called a racist, say, you're just saying that because I'm white. Anti-racism is just a code word for anti-white. And you'll watch them start going nuts. It's fun. If you're a young kid, you can drive your elderly anti-white parents crazy. You like doing that. If you're an older person, an older white rabbit, well, you can drive those kids crazy that are brainwashed. But anyways, we'll be back with you Wednesday. Talk about something new, something interesting. And by all means, keep listening to not only In-Game Exotica, but Horus and Avengers Follow the White Rabbit. It's a free podcast. It's there for everyone. If you don't like the first two, probably wouldn't like the rest. But if you like the first two, you love what's coming.
You have been listening to Endgame Exotica, a members-only podcast exclusive to whiterabbitradio.net.